Hello everyone, this is Spectre. Welcome back to the Land of Empires. And in this video, I want to discuss glorious resource buildings. Now, these glorious buildings were introduced back in January of this year, 2024, and they tremendously increased the capacity as well as the resource production across these buildings. Originally at level 30, we only had a cap of 53,000 collectible resources, and that really made these buildings kind of a meme. These buildings served zero function aside from needing to upgrade in order to upgrade other buildings, but in terms of collecting resources, they served absolutely zero purpose. Most of our resource gathering came from gathering resource tiles, or in the Battle of Disorder, we control resource nodes. However, with the introduction of glorious buildings, that has changed the story a little bit. Now, collecting directly from these buildings is still fairly inefficient. As you can see, these buildings cap out at 2.8 million, and they cap out after 10 hours. So if you were fairly diligent in your day, you collect them about twice a day, you would get a grand total of, I guess, 24 million resources, because you have 4 buildings of each type. So you can collect about 3 million per building per day. So that's about, 24 million resources. And that is nowhere near enough to keep up with the amount of troops you need to heal in the grand scheme of things. As battles are ramping up, we need more and more resources to just empty our hospital capacity. In order to heal, I guess, 10% of my hospital capacity, I needed to use almost 30 million food and well over 30 million wood. So collecting straight up from these resource buildings is by no means a feasible way to farm the resources. Now, one thing that hasn't really been appreciated until we receive these glorious resource buildings are these 2 resource skills, one of which is bulging stockpile. It immediately yields some amount of resources. It says a significant amount, but it doesn't specify exactly how much across all of your buildings. And this is the same for the accelerated production skill. Now, the only 2 differences between these 2 skills in terms of usage is that this skill has a 12-hour cooldown, while this other skill has a rather annoying 1-hour cooldown. Honestly, I wish they just buff this skill, like make the cooldown the same as this skill, but buff the actual value by, I guess, 12, or by 12. That would make this skill much more usable for non-absolute tryhards. So I just kind of want to spend this video doing a comparison between the different amounts of resources you can farm via these 2 skills and compare that against straight up farming resources from these resource tiles or capturing the different nodes in the Battle of Disorder. So after a little bit of experimenting around, I discovered that this skill actually gives you 10 times the maximum capacity of your resource tiles. Now, where can you check the maximum capacity? You can either check by looking at the resource buildings themselves. As you can see, the capacity of this glorious 7.1, I think it's 7.1, is that right? Yeah, 7.1. So I upgraded a single node after glorious 7, and this building has a capacity of 1.54 million. Now, you can easily check your maximum capacity or production value by going to the city info and going to food production. Your capacity will always be 10 times that of your production. So you can see my capacity. It actually does say, actually it doesn't. Yeah, you can only check your production, but your capacity, just multiply this number by 10 and you're all good. So my capacity across the 4 buildings is this number. And upon using this skill, bulging stockpile, I got 5.92 million food. And that suggests to me exactly 10 times your maximum capacity, which is quite good. If you upgrade all your buildings to Glorious 10 instead of 5.92 million resources, you will gain 11.24 million resources, so million wood and food, every time you click on this button. So every hour you can collect from your stockpile and it will collect 10 times your maximum capacity. Now this skill, on the other hand, after I I used the 100% resource gathering speed because a little bit of testing between my alliance and I, we discovered that the resource gathering speed actually had a significant effect on this skill. Maybe not necessarily this skill. So this skill will always be a fixed amount, while this skill actually is affected by your gathering speed, I guess. But after utilizing that skill, I used accelerated production, and it gave me 33.7 million food. So that is 5.7 times higher than this bulging stockpile skill. Although this skill is not better per se than bulging stockpile if they both had a 1 hour cooldown, because this has a 12-hour cooldown, so you divide the value by 12 and it ends up being a little under half as good as bulging stockpile. But let's just say that you were an absolute tryhard and you kept these skills on cooldown all the time, meaning that every 12 hours you clicked on this skill, every 1 hour you clicked on this skill. How many resources you would get? Well, here's a table that I quickly brought together. From resource gathering, meaning that every 2 hours you would send out 6 marches to gather level 8 tiles, you can gather up to 777 million either food or wood per day. So this is on any farm account with relatively high gathering speed. Now, on the topic of disorder tiles, if you controlled 100 level 8 tiles and had a 150% resource buff, of course, the 100% will come from you buying the $5 value pack, which is this pack. So, of course, without the value pack, your income would be significantly hampered. So you will be relying only on the flag, the gate buffs, etc., which is about 50%. But if you buy this pack for $5, you immediately get doubled all resource tile production from the Battle Disorder tiles. So assuming you have 100 tiles, you would get about 450 million resources per day passively. Now this is, of course, the best in terms of passive income. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to send marches out to gather, which is honestly a very big pain in the butt. You can still get about 450 million per day, which is very respectable. However, of course, that is far from enough. Now, finally, we take a look at the different glorious levels of upgrading for your resource buildings. If you upgraded all of them to Glorious 7, so all of your 4 wood and food resource buildings to level 7, that will cost you about 6,700 cents, which translates to about 336 US dollars before taking into account any kind of discount. I know, of course, Nuverse gives everyone a 20% discount by default nowadays, but it's still about $280. So for the cost of $280 and a little bit of tryharding, or maybe a lot of tryharding, you can boost your income further by 413 million resources of both food and wood per day. Note that this includes both, so you just divide by 2 if you want to get the individual amount for food or wood. And if you upgraded all your buildings to Glorious 10, you would go from 413 million all the way up to 800 million. So by using 1400 cents, regular cents, which costs about $700, you can boost your daily resource income by up to 800 million at maximum glorious buildings. Now, whether this is worthwhile, it kind of depends. If, for example, once they release Glorious 15, and Glorious 15, so going to Glorious 11 requires all your buildings to reach Glorious 10, then I think that this is, of course, very much worthwhile to be taken advantage of. These two skills actually have some degree of utility now in terms of giving you a significant amount of resources back whenever you use them. Like even with just my level 7 buildings, I use these skills quite frequently now, and it gives me about 80 million resources every day just by clicking on them from time to time, which is a decent amount. Once I upgrade them to Glorious 10, just by clicking on them a few times a day, I can get like 160 to 200 million resources. Of course, everyone nowadays use farm accounts, and they can do whatever macro they want on their farm account or macro their main account. It doesn't matter. But this is now an extra source of resources. And I would honestly not suggest anyone upgrade them, because honestly, you can get plenty from just farming or asking your alliance farmers to donate you some resources. But this is somewhat relevant now, at least. Prior to these glorious resource buildings, they were complete meme, completely useless, waste of space, just there for decoration. But now you can actually get a meaningful amount of resources after upgrading them to a certain glorious level. Now, before I end this discussion, one last thing I want to note is that the first couple glorious levels aren't actually very efficient. The first glorious level especially. I don't have a great example here, but if we were to just look at the lumber mill, notice that after each glorious level, the amount of extra production and collection you get is increased by a fixed amount. It actually increases by 1,000 each glorious level. But the cost does not scale in a similar way. So it's actually quite efficient to upgrade to maybe Glorious 6 before moving on to the next building, because the first few Glorious tiers are relatively inefficient. However, once you hit Glorious 7, the efficiency goes down quite a bit, because the additional cost is no longer higher than the additional production and collection gain from the extra glorious level. So if you were to upgrade these, I would suggesting upgrading them one at a time and stopping somewhere around Glorious 6 or Glorious 7. Afterwards, you can just upgrade them one at a time once again from Glorious 7 to 8, 7 to 8, 7 to 8, and then 8 to 9, etc. Of course, once Glorious 15 comes out and we find out that all these buildings need to hit Glorious 10 before we can make any upgrade, then I would upgrade all of these without much of a thought, because I think it's a fairly good upgrade. It's brought some degree of utility to these buildings until the developers actually give us worthwhile tiles to farm, something beyond just level 8 that we've had since season 1. So yeah, I hope everyone enjoyed this video, a comparison between the different farming sources and rates that you can get. In actuality, of course, you will be adding this amount to one of these or this amount to one of these. You cannot add these two together, because once you come out of the disorder, you are no longer eligible for any kind of income from disorder. So if you are holding on to like 100 tiles and you don't want to farm like this, just sit in the battle disorder. You will get the passive income. The moment you leave, all your resources will stop regenerating. Yeah, I think that's all I have to cover. I will see everyone in the next video, which will probably be on the BOD meta. Take care.